Coogs House. It's game week. We're finally there, but we also got to tell you that we're right about something.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making it for listening each and every day here. And if you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below if a muffin is really just a cupcake. Today's show is brought to you by Ultimate College Football. More on that. Ultimate College Football head coach, this would be specific. More on that in a moment. We got a lot to get into today. It's all kinds of distractions because it's finally game week. The 2024 season, the start of the Willie Fritz era is upon us. So we're going to talk some about UNLV in this week, what we know at this point. We're going to talk some about the expectations for this year and what all that entails. But we also got to talk to you about being right because, as we mentioned last week, talks are heating up with UConn and the Big 12. Last week, we reported that Locked On UConn's Mark Zanetto and Locked On Big 12 had a conversation about donors having talked to Mark behind the scenes, saying it felt a little imminent. And frankly, a lot of people said, what? A lot of people would comment on this show. A lot of people commented. People were upset about that and this and other thing. I want to talk about the latest on that and why it's actually more right today than it was last week, as well as reiterating how this helps Houston really, really quickly, okay? Last Friday, midday and afternoon, you had the ESPNs, the Yahoos, the other big, I say other big because Locked On's obviously fairly big now, but the other big sports outlets all reporting the same thing Mark Zanetto had told you earlier in the week. As of Sunday, Pete Mundo of Heartland Sports said a conversation with a prominent UConn booster. And the conversation ended up coming out in a tweet from the booster, which read that I do not want UConn to leave the Big East. I'd prefer to stay independent of football and self-fund outside of a conference, but we don't have the financial resources from TV contracts, donors, or the state of Connecticut. I don't believe Connecticut taxpayers want to fund UConn football. Last time we stayed complacent, we got shut out of the ACC and got stuck in the AAC. We need to control our own destiny, and it seems like the Big 12 was the right and only opportunity we have if you believe the future of college athletics includes football. We don't know how everything is going to shake out, but if we're going to go down the road of big-time football, we need to put a stadium on campus, and all the haters and doubters of UConn football can compete on a national level. We've done it before. Now, what I want to stress here is a couple things. One is the way this works out, okay? The plan is as now, as it's being reported by others and my buddy Mark here, right, is that UConn would join the conference in all Olympic sports, including basketballs, both men and women, in 2026-27 school year. That gives them time to officially and legally leave the Big East on the best of terms. The buyouts and negotiations would all be figured out between now and then. There are numbers out there, but those numbers also shift, obviously. Houston knows that as well as anyone. They would be entering the Big 12 conference, and because they're leaving the Big East, they would get a full ESPN share without cutting into anyone in the present tense Big 12 conference's share. They might not get the Fox Sports and the other people's shares, but they'd be okay with that because the Big East dollar is not the same as the Big 12 ESPN dollar in and of itself. The tentative plan would be to extend football and invite in 2031, that big looming year where the next TV rights deal is up for the Big 12 and things will be changing. That could be a football and basketball separate deals. That could be a monstrosity deal. Who even knows what app that deal will be signed with by the time we get there, right? 2031 sounds so far away, but that is the first time it feels like you'll see UConn really with a Big 12 patch on their football jersey, right? Between now and then, while the basketball programs would be competing, the Olympic sport programs would be competing in the Big 12, UConn would be, as that booster pointed out, funding and putting money into their football program. All right, Parker, this isn't Locked On UConn, it's Locked On Coogs. How does this affect us? I mentioned last week It is beneficial to Houston in every sense to bring UConn in. It absolutely is, right? Okay, for the one thing, I say bring that crummy football team in right now. Let's get a win. I ain't mad about that one stinking bit. On a more global perspective, more 30,000 feet, right? And a conference that has so clearly hung its hat on basketball, and as a university that has got a great basketball program going, there's no other way to look at this than a win for the program, because you're elevating the Big 12 by pulling in a program that's won six, not just back-to-back titles, six titles since 1999, right? Houston is trying to have the same rise, right? We heard blue collar, not blue blood, and I get that. I also would point out that Houston men's basketball program is essentially where UConn, maybe even be in a better place than where UConn was in like 1998, right? Where you've done basically everything but win the national title, and that's the only looming thing in your resume, right? That sets up for nice parallels and storytelling, but also gives you another measuring stick. It adds legitimacy to the conference. Another way, I mean, it's already the best basketball conference of all time, but you're only adding more power. You go from Kansas and Houston to adding Arizona, now adding UConn, right? Continue. I mean, you could have a Final Four legitimately without any real questions being asked of just Big 12 schools on the men's side, right? You also had the historic women's program. I mean, like, there is not a women's program like UConn women. That obviously elevates the rest of the Big 12 as well. I would argue that the Big 12 conference, like the median team on the women's side, is better than the Big East and how that plays in and so on. But that's not here or there, right? As we look at this, we also should point out that UConn, with a tiny football program, is putting in revenues similar to what the low end of the Big 12 programs are, right? And when you factor in the fact they'll be getting their own boost, that means they'll be getting more money to then invest in the football program that they're trying to bring into the conference 2031 and elevate it right by then. But between now and then, every time teams make a televised event like March Madness or what have you, the conference would get more units and kickbacks. It feels like a big deal when UConn doesn't make the men's tournament, and they haven't missed the women's tournament like in my lifetime, right? And so it's constant kickbacks to the conference as far as units go from making the NCAA tournament, okay? Along the way, building up this football program gives the Big 12 Conference a foothold in the Northeast that's really kind of unclaimed territory. Syracuse is up there, but realistically, that opens up a lot for schools like Houston that have a whole part of the country that they don't get to explore as far as recruiting, as far as major events go, and all those kinds of things you can place up there, right? And so it constantly finds ways to pull money back into the conference. Again, I almost wish the football program joined faster than 2031, because then we could get some wins against them along the way while they're putting money in. I would point out, too, part of this hinges on the fact that they've actually spent the last 2 or 3 years doing things like pulling in coaches with SEC resumes, getting NIL set up for bringing in transfers from Power 4 schools. I mean, they've done things in the last 2 or 3 years that indicate like they can start to flip this switch, right? Not unlike when Houston was in Conference USA once upon a time, right? Not unlike, frankly, how all of the schools that came in with Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, Central Florida, and Houston, kind of had those lackluster times 10 or 15 years ago, right? By 2031, we could be talking about that in the same kind of way for UConn, because it wasn't that long ago, in like 8, 9, 10, or maybe it was 7, 8, 9, I forget the dates off the top of my head, that UConn was like competing and getting to New Year's Six Bowls and stuff. I mean, they had a decent football program, right? It was short-lived. It was a long time. It was 15 years ago, but it existed. It can happen. And again, this is a part of the country where there isn't a major football program. Syracuse is, I guess, close-ish. Rutgers is a little further south-ish. There's just only so many options, right? I mean, they're not playing with NYU or Columbia, right? It also, for marketing purposes, expands in that Northeast market. Again, we've mentioned before, the 4-letter worldwide leader in sports network loves the University of UConn. The University of UConn is redundant, huh? Yeah. But ESPN loves UConn, and they love UConn because it's in their backyard. They get crazy access, and honestly, it's the hometown team, right? It's the same way that when they opened up ESPN LA, and all of a sudden you saw USC on everything, right? Like those things go hand in hand. And getting the Big 12 there probably strengthens the relationship between the conference and ESPN. And again, there's an aspect of this that if Houston wants to make sure they're in the Big 12, because the Big 12 is going to be the third power conference when the fourth one falls down. They want to make sure that the ACC falls apart and not the Big 12. Part of that might include taking teams away like a UConn just so that the ACC can't get it. And as someone who wants to see Houston in power conference football for a long time, you got to make sure you're in the power conference. And that might mean doing these chess kind of moves to make sure the ACC is not that. Now, I've talked at nines about why we get locked down. We're right about this one. I'm happy that we're right about this one. Happy for Mark for getting it right. But it's also football season, and I want to talk about football season game week this week in a second. But first, as it is game week, you're probably itching to get out there and get cheering on the Cougs and those kinds of things. But if you cannot wait, you got to get your football fix right now. You got to go to Ultimate College Football Head Coach to do it. I want to take a moment to make sure you get a real vivid picture of what Ultimate College Football HC is all about. It's an amazing game and simulation, but let you step in the shoes of like on the football field with other coaches as a head coach and lead your football program, the Cougs, to glory. Can you imagine being a head coach at Houston and getting to be like Willie Fritz and those kinds of things? It's just an incredible chance and opportunity on this video game. And here's what I love about this game. I'm an offensive guy. Throughout the games, you're responsible for calling offensive plays. Your strategy can not only determine the success of your football season, but can shape the future and legacy of the program. Ultimate College Football HC is ad-free, completely 100% playable offline, and you can play on the go as you want, when you want to. Of course, we have a special offer at Locked On Coogs. Use the promo code Locked On CFB in all caps inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start in the dynasty you're creating in Houston. Download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so as we look to season 1 of Willie Fritz, okay, frankly, had this Big 12 stuff not been going on, like this whole show would be like leading into it. We're going to have all week to talk about what is going on with week 1. I will say typically in a given game week, Monday, so we're kind of breaking down what happened. Well, week 0, Houston didn't play. So we're looking forward to what's coming. And I really want to talk about like expectations and what to expect and looking at the entirety of the Willie Fritz experience, the entirety of this season. And I think one thing that stands out in hearing him talk to every single interview and hearing him talk to the media and hearing him talk at Big 12 Media Days, every single time you hear Willie Fritz speak, you know that his football teams are prepared, right? They prepare for every given situation. They've already got talks about what they're going to do if the headsets go out, if maybe the clock goes out, because they only get the headsets for the first 15 seconds to talk to the quarterbacks and the linebacker or whoever they have on defense for the play starts. But they have that this year, right? So they have that 15 seconds. Well, if the play doesn't get in, they have a backup plan. They have backup plans for if so-and-so breaks a shoelace and can't play. They've got backup plans for if the bus breaks. They have every single possible thing you might need to be ready for. Fritz is constantly ready for, right? And I think back, we got to see it up close and personal, actually, Houston. It's not the happiest memory. But in 2022, Tulane walked into Houston. Yes, they had Tajay Spears, a very good football team, but beat Houston with a third-string quarterback. And frankly, without reliving that game, I think it's worth noting that there were a lot of parts of the game where he looked not like a third-string quarterback, but he was just that prepared. That's the level of detail Fritz brings. That's the level of detail you can expect from this team. The other thing I think you can expect from Fritz teams to go forward through the season and beyond is that I don't think we're ever going to question the effort of this program again. And as far as building culture goes, it might take some time to get everyone on the same page with that. But truthfully, whether it's finishing routes through the end of the end zone and toss the ball to the referee at practice, or coach walking around the play through the whistle at PTTW on his shirt at all times. The focal point is playing hard. And I know it sounds silly, like in major college athletics, Division I, Power 4 football, like we're gonna make sure we play hard. Like I think a lay person might think of like, well, of course they're gonna play hard. This is why they're on scholarship. This is how they get or someone that's maybe even more in the ways be like, well, everybody plays hard. But there is a difference between teams that are just relentless, right? Relentlessly playing hard. And I think that when you go back and look at those Tulane teams, or the Sam Houston State teams from a little bit further back, or wherever you want to look at Willie's journey to get to Houston, that's something that's identifiably Fritz, right? Fritzian? Can we call it Fritzzy? I don't. Anyway, something that very clearly ties to him, right? It's a focal point of everything he does, everything his programs do, right? They're going to play like ridiculously hard. I wouldn't expect games like last year against Tech or TCU where you saw a great Houston for about half a football game, right? Now execution, right? We're getting there, right? They're a talent developing program, right? So we're going to continue to grow and see talent develop both over the course of the year and the time Fritz is here, right? If you listen to the Big 12 preview show last week with the Locked On Big 12 host, you're like, I'm looking for qualitative ways to look at this season because I feel confident enough that we got the right guy, and the quantitative, the data, will play out over the course of the long run on this one, right? As long as they're doing the right things this year. And I think that'll be things like, yes, but they didn't quit at any point in a game, right? Or, were they outmatched in talent this 1 week against future Big 12 champion so-and-so? Yes. Could you tell from anything outside of just they had a guy that ran a 4.2? No, right? Like those kinds of things are what I'm looking for. And I think you'll see that play out between a great defense and great running games, kind of in a handful of close games. And what I bet happens is there'll be a couple games that Houston wins they're not supposed to win. Well, I think that's going to happen regardless. But there'll be games Houston wins they're not supposed to win. What's going to have happened in those games is Houston's going to be in a close game in the fourth quarter and effort wins, right? And the other team's just not ready for what Houston's bringing to the table as an underdog that week. Now, Houston is a favorite Saturday, hosting UNLV by 1.5 on FanDuel. More on that later. Other things I'm looking for this week as far as looking at the season, depth chart should be out soon, the official depth chart. I'm assuming Parker Jenkins starts. Rashawn Sanford's his backup. They're very different backs. I also see Jamarian Burnett somewhere in them making the mix a little shaken up. How that running back rotation we'll see next week, how that goes. I'm interested to see who in the depth chart is listed as the 3 starting wide receivers. Manjack, I assume Stephon Boogie Johnson will be the 2 guys returning from last year's team. But then is it freshman Kobe? Is it Jonah Wilson? Is it Mekhi Muse? Who comes in as that third receiver? Am I wrong? And maybe it's multiple of them. The receiver room is really, really talented, exceedingly so for a team that's probably going to be a run-first kind of football team. Kind of inverse of that defensively, I'm looking at the depth chart. It's like, they're going to rotate corners. I should preface this with that. But who starts? I think McCutcheon will start. And he's listed as a captain, or he went to media days with the team. So I assume he'll be important. He's played Big 12 and a Pac-12 football before. But Ajani Carter, J.D. Rim, Joel Gaston, even Brian Massey, who gets the other corner spot, who's listed in the second in the depth chart, who's going to rotate through, who's the nickel guy. These things are going to become really important, especially when you factor in, based on what Fritz's teams have done in the past and what happened in the spring game, you'll see a safety constantly involved in the run game. I think A.J. Halsey is so built for that. But how that plays out moving forward will change how things go this season. And I just don't know what to expect out of those. I think the corners are really good. And frankly, I was talking to someone this weekend. I think Houston is better at about 2/3 the defensive spots than they were last year. And that's not to say the guys last year weren't good. I just think these guys are better. And the truth is that the defensive line, we saw talent leave. Nelson Caesar goes pro. Akeem Ajichalaya is now at TCU. Chidozie Nwankwo is now at Colorado. But whether it's Stillman, Cooper, they've got talented guys up front too. It's just obviously you can never have too many of those guys. And I think the other 2/3 of the defense are just flat better than they were last year. And that's kudos to who they've got in. And I'm that and Fritz and Wood. We'll see. I think the defense is going to look good. I think the defense is going to look good. And they're going to look good against the UNLV. And I want to talk about why that is and what I'm predicting with UNLV in a second. But first, we got a new buddy here at Locked On Coogs. And this is one that I have to say I have a personal relationship with. And that is 5 Hour Energy. Because as I mentioned, I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I do this show every night, which you get the next morning. There are a lot of hours I'm awake in a day. And I sometimes got to have a little help. My help is 5 Hour Energy, especially after lunch. Look, there's scientific research to show you're going to hit a wall, or at least 70% of people in the United States hit a wall after lunch. And 5 Hour Energy is the shot you need to help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it, right? It's a great help. It comes in a great small package. It's easy to take down really quickly. 0 sugar, super convenient, portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting over or through or however you got to get past that wall after lunch. Trust me, as someone does not sleep a whole lot, you're going to need it for getting through that and on to the next thing. If you go to 5energy.com, that is the number 5, ourenergy.com, get some 5 Energy. You can get some 5 Hour Energy product today. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Trust me, you will not regret that one. I might have plugged that one in myself once already. This offer is only valid until September 30th, so get your orders in now. On one order, you cannot be used in any other promotions. So go to 5 Hour Energy, the number 5, ourenergy.com, and use code LOCKEDONCFB. Go to 5energy.com today. All right, so one thing that's talking about looking at UNLV is that they don't know who their quarterback is. Now, they've got 2 guys with interesting resumes coming in for a 5th, each guy coming in for a 5th year. The 2 guys look like they're competing when you look at message boards. A couple guys I DM'd as well, including people you might hear later this week on the show. It looks like it's kind of between 2 guys, one named Matt Sluka and one guy named Haj Malik Williams. I'm going to say that right. Haj Malik Williams. Matt Sluka comes from Holy Cross. Haj Malik Williams comes from Campbell University, Patriot League football, and I think FCS football at Campbell. Different quarterbacks, both like to run, right? Matt Sluka was a Patriot League Player of the Year, first team All Patriot League a couple years. He's a running quarterback, kind of likes more stride, long strides. He's got a shifty jump cut that I think is just you get defenders like just kind of chasing him down or whatever. Like his jump cut isn't extremely elusive, but it seems to be very effective while he was at Holy Cross. As far as his passing goes, he's much more of a middle of the field guy, both short and deep shots. He's got like a slingshot release if you're into how that helps determine a skill of a quarterback and the arm strength and kind of stuff. It's a real like long whipping motion. He's a solid football player and a good leader for what was a good at their level Holy Cross football team. Haj Malik Williams is the same kind of thing as far as his leadership skills and success at Campbell University go, but he's an RPO guy. I mean, he's got wiggle, he's got shakes, he's got elusiveness. He's 6'1", where Matt Sluka is 6'3". This guy, Haj Malik Williams also hits the outside with his he's better at hitting sidelines with the football than he is in the middle of the field where there's more bodies. You typically see that with guys who can like put it where my guy gets it or nobody gets it, right on the sideline. The biggest thing with me about Haj Malik Williams is like he's a guy you can't, when you pass rush, you can't lose contain, you can't lose your rush lanes. I mean, he's really, really dynamic as a runner. And that's to say, again, Matt Sluka is a true 2-threat guy as the other quarterback option for them. But it'll be interesting to see how Houston deals with them. And I think a big part of how Houston's going to deal with them is the improved linebacker play. If you listen to the show throughout the season last year, that was the group I was probably most critical of on the football team was the linebackers, just because, frankly, I expected a lot out of them, if we're being blunt, right? And in the Big 12, they have to play very well. I think Houston got better at the linebacker spots this year. One is just Jamal Morris becoming a more veteran leader, but they also added, Corey Platt got hurt, so we didn't really get to add him, but he's going to be so good at football whenever he gets healthy, guys. Anyway, the two guys they added that get to play this year that I'm excited about getting to play that I think will be starters on the depth chart when it comes out are Michael Baton. You watch any clips of the defense in the fall camp, this dude sticks out. Now he's Louisiana Monroe transfer via like a New York junior college, via a couple other schools. He went like Houston, I guess it was Houston Baptist at the time, and down here, and then bounced around. I guess he's originally from Katy. Dude makes plays. And I think part of the transferring around, all that for him was like changing positions. At one point he was a receiver, at one point he's a quarterback, now he's a linebacker. I will say that he has the leadership of a quarterback, the speed of a receiver, and hits like a linebacker. And those three things, while he's a little undersized, will go a long, long way. Right. Kendra Gant is kind of the better athlete, the 6'3", the long arms, etc. He's kind of an outside linebacker-ish. He might be more rushing the pass or something. They'll see this fall. But as a linebacker, I could see Kendra Gant being honestly like spied onto because of his athleticism. This whichever of these two dynamic running quarterbacks, run first kind of guys that they have, I can see Kendra Gant being paired up with them a lot. But I'll see AJ Halsey coming down as that box safety. And just as a safety that hits really hard, tracking the quarterback and spy type situations on third and medium or whatever, right? When you want to make sure you don't get beat by the quarterback's legs. As far as the other side of the ball goes, again, we'll be previewing UNLV all week. As far as the other side of the ball goes, I would point out that that UNLV's defense coordinator, same guy was there last year. It was his first year as the D coordinator last year. And they had a big turnaround last year too. So, that's how it goes. They played the Mountain West Championship game against Boise State. I watched some of that one to get kind of schematic stuff. Boise State runs a lot of two tight end stuff like we're going to expect to see out of Barbay this fall. Offensive coordinator at Houston runs a lot of two tight end stuff, that is. And that, frankly, worked out really, really well for Boise. Boise ran a lot of two tight end running quarterback kind of stuff that really threw off box counts, and UNLV had a lot of trouble with schematically. And that, was in the conference championship game when they had like the full season to have learned the offense and learned the defense. So I'd imagine coming into week one, having that whole, you had practice for months, but you had game reps, that Houston can take some advantage there, especially if you're looking to get, more Donovan Smith in the run game. Boise State's quarterback had 90 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns against this UNLV scheme before with 2 tight end stuff on the field, right? Looking for more of a 4-2-5 kind of look. And the real reason that works out for Houston is that if you can spread them out with receiving tight bodies and then block them up because they're tight ends, you suddenly have a lot less linebackers on the field to keep up with your running quarterback. It really could be an effective day for Houston running the football with the quarterback and blocking up with tight ends if they get to that, right? That's my early analysis. Talking to more people about UNLV throughout the week, getting ready for the game on Saturday. It's going to be exciting when we kick off the Willie Fritz era. We get to do it at TDECU Stadium. I could not think of a better way to spend your Saturday next weekend. So tell me in the comments where you're going, where you're sitting. Locked On Coogs, the primary Locked On podcast network. For a second listen today, first of all, I should back up. Appreciate you making us your first listen. For a second listen, Locked On Big 12. Drake's undoubtedly talking about being right about UConn, because we all appreciate him being right on that one. But they're doing who's in, who's out, preseason awards, all that kind of stuff at the conference. So go check out Drake and Locked On Big 12 today. Locked On Coogs, the primary Locked On podcast network, means your team are Houston Cougars every day. Go Cougs.